good morning. Welcome to Embracing the Journey. I'm not sure what time it is that you're watching it, but for us it is morning because the boys are quiet during this time. But we just wanted to say we're excited that you are joining us and you're watching it with us.
Yes, my name is Todd.
And I'm Whitney.
And just in case we haven't met, and we are just going to dive deeper into the talk from Sunday. We're in a series based on this question, how do I lead myself? And really, that's the heart of embracing the journey, is leading ourselves and embracing the journey. Jesus wants to impact us on the deck in our everyday lives. So let's dive in. Now, one of my favorite things is when we first started talking about 1 Samuel 25, I'd never heard anybody have your view on this passage. So could you just share your initial reaction?
Yeah, I don't know really what that says about me then. If you've never heard anybody have
Unique.
this take. And I wrestled with this passage. It was early on in the week. Todd had mentioned for me to read about Abigail, and so I was excited. And I've read about her before, but really studying this passage. And to be honest, I was really kind of frustrated. I was frustrated with David. And I think we all might have like a love-hate relationship with David. I think we see his flaws, and then we get frustrated, and then we see the good, which isn't that us. Really, like, we're not perfect, and thankful that Jesus uses us in our imperfections, which is David, and we'll see that more. But I think I did what I wanted to know in just reading the first few verses about Nabal was what was more about him, more story behind him. Obviously, there was some built-up aggression towards David or towards just the whole scenario, but I felt like the wrath of God was pretty quick instantly, and like he made one mistake and then he was, David was out for him.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I was like, they didn't even give him a second chance, or so that was just initially when you first read it. Now when you're diving into it more, like you studied more translations or you were able to come back and talk. We were able to discuss it a little bit more. But I was thinking I was frustrated with that, and I was frustrated with Abigail. Not with her, but that, she just, it might have something with authority if I don't like what she did.
Just share it. I love it.
That's embarrassing. I'm just being real.
Yeah.
This is what happens when I read scripture. We just get into the storyline, but I was kind of like, Abigail, why, David is angry. Why are you just bowing down before him? Like, which, again, in culture in that time, that was the reverency of, and anyway. So
I love it.
that's probably like for another talk for another day of, Abigail's response. But I think it was really good, and going into it from your talk and like even diving into it more and seeing more of it, she showed leadership.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, that was the key for her, and that like diffused the situation.
Yes.
And
I'll just say this, like, as we talked about that, I really want Whitney to share that, because I think that's part of the goal for us, is that when we read the Bible, it comes alive. And so I loved hearing Whitney's take on it, because A, I'd never read it that way, but B, it was like, there was so much emotion in her response, and I was like, this is awesome. I think sometimes we come to the Bible and it's like, it's boring, it's ancient. It's like, man, no, these are real people with flaws just like us, and I just loved her viewpoint on that. And I'm going to kind of bounce off that. So she challenged me then to dig into, okay, what is Nabal's character? And something that I didn't share on Sunday, called this bonus content, but that I really enjoyed, is in verse 5 and 9, the name of David is mentioned, especially if you're reading the ESV, it's really clear in that translation. And then in verse 10, Nabal basically asks, well, who is David? But it's really clear that the name of David, like, he's known. And just to kind of back up, name in this time meant your reputation, or we might say your personal brand. So the personal brand of David was known. He killed Goliath. He worked for Saul. Everybody knew Saul was trying to kill him. And then it also, in verse 25, there's this subtle contrast between the name of Nabal. And it took me a while to get there, because it's separated. It's like 5 and 9, and then all the way down to verse 25, Abigail's like, hey, Nabal is as his name says.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, there's this contrast between the personal brand or reputation of David and the personal brand of Nabal. And even though David was flawed, that bird was awesome. Did you guys see that? Anyway, even though, it almost hit your head. Sorry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just like, woo!
Likes the braid.
But even though David was flawed, he was still known as someone of integrity who was trying to do the right thing. And Nabal was just foolish, stubborn. I mean, his own people call him worthless. And so clearly they had a reputation, which makes me think, okay, well, what am I known for? To borrow a question from Jeff Henderson, in the 4 book. Like, what is my personal brand, my reputation, just the way other people see me? So, I don't know. I think that's something I want to keep considering and I took away from this.
Yeah, and I think, like, even Abigail probably asked that question.
Yeah.
I mean, that took a lot for her to go before David and surrender and say, I'll take the punishment.
Yes.
I think that again just shows her level of character and her willingness to sacrifice to save her people, because she wasn't just saving Nabal.
Yeah.
David had said and threatened, I'm going to kill all the men. Well, like you had kind of talked about, she probably had sons in that tribe, a brother. Like, so I don't know. I think back to that too. Like, as you dive into it more, of just her character, and willing to sacrifice herself for her people.
Yeah.
Initially, and that's willing to take the fall. And I think sometimes as leaders, we have to be willing to do that.
Yeah. I think you're right, and really that reminds me. I was listening to Andy Stanley and Patrick Lenciani. They did an interview, and some of you may have read Patrick Lenciani. He's brilliant in leadership, and I'm going to get his new book. I think it's called Motivate or Motivation. But he basically said the economics on leadership are bad. It was the quote I shared with you.
Yeah.
And he was like, because you're always going to give more than you get. And it was like Abigail was willing to do that. She was willing to pay the price. No matter what came for her, she was going to do the right thing. And I respect her tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was. I think as we dive more into even to David, we see, more of a humble heart when he when she goes before him. You know, like he could have just stayed at a wrath and been angry and just said, I don't care what you say. He's still hurt my pride, but he doesn't. He sees and allows God to use Abigail in his life, which is a question you posed on Sunday. Who are Abigails, in our life, which I think has been really good. And we saw, if you missed Instagram Live on Monday night, we saw Caleb and Nathan discussing that, and I thought that was so good. And Caleb just shared so much honesty and truth about Abigails in his life. And I think we all probably have some Abigails, that God had placed, whether we might have see them as that or not. We've seen Abigails in our life to help us, calm us down. And I'd say you're that for me. I mean, as I read this passage, that day, you helped me see the truth.
That's awesome. But I think that's part of marriage. Is that there's times that I'm frustrated and I want to make a rash decision, and you've got to be Abigail for me, but there's also times that I've got to be that Abigail for you. Yeah. And I also think about other people. Funny story is, maybe for another time, is Whitney and I went on our first official date, and then she broke up with me. And Jason Cox was an Abigail in my life as we met at the diner on First, and kind of advised me on how to navigate that situation, and worked out pretty well. Good job, Jason.
Yeah, he said play hard to get. Well, that wasn't working.
I mean, I'm just saying. But, I mean, just to have those people that you could go to, and I mean, I could just go down the list of people in our lives, but I think that's super huge,
Yeah.
And let's dive into this a little bit. Abigail, just who she is and her outstanding character. One of the things that I noticed when I was studying and I wrote this is she really acts as the hands and feet of God on earth in the story. And maybe I'm the only one that's thought this, maybe I'm off on this, I'm not sure, but I just thought, isn't she a picture of the church? Because isn't that who we're supposed to be as the church? That in people's lives, when they're about to ruin themselves, when they're about to wreck it all, that we step in and we serve and we speak truth, and we're humble. Though she wasn't coming in like, David, you're so dumb. I mean, she was so humble, like you pointed out. So I don't know, that was something that stood out to me, as Abigail really is a picture of who the church should be in people's lives.
Yeah, and then just willing to give her not just her life, but she took a ton of things that they had, food to help with David's army, and so I mean she gave, and I think that was really was really impactful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that David also saw that in
Yeah.
that time, you know. So yeah, as the church, we should give, and I think that's really
I love that. And just a shout out to Patty Richmond and her husband. I know they had an opportunity to
Yeah.
serve on Saturday, and it was the middle of the weekend, and they dropped everything. And there were several other people on the delivery team that were willing to do that, and Lindsay Powell had worked in that situation too. But I think just those little glimpses of who the church is and who we're supposed to be, just like this glimpse of what Abigail did.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is just to speak to the men, like let's value ladies in leadership. And I think that's huge, and just something that I've taken from this story and I've also just observed in life is that a lot of times the ladies in our lives have some insight and discernment that we as men just don't have. And look, I may be stereotyping there. I know there's discerning men, there may be women that aren't gifted in that, but this is just my experience. This is who Abigail is. She's very discerning. I mean, her name and her character, she's described as just being full of discretion. And I think just something that we've taken as our team at Public Church is we've said, as we've noticed that, we're like, anytime we're in an interview process, we want to bring in a female just to get an extra layer of discernment. Because I think we're just better together when we have that male and female perspective in the room. So that's a way that, like, we as leaders and some of us men have said, man, we want to value the contribution of women in leadership and make sure we're listening to them, because we can make mistakes really easily if they're not in the room and if we're not listening. So
yeah, I don't really feel like that's stereotyping. I think that's just using gifts, you know. I mean, I think that, you know, obviously men and women are different, absolutely, but I do think women sometimes are intuitive to certain things, especially maybe emotions or feelings, you know, in a room, or we can sense things. And you know, like you said, not everybody has that gift, but I feel like if you're walking with the Holy Spirit, you know, daily, and I think that we all have the Holy Spirit speaking to us.
Yes,
you know,
that's true.
so even men, you know, we sense that. So I think I think that's really good, especially at Public Church, that we've seen, you know, an interview process, and just it brings more people in into the process for buy-in. I think that's wise.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and then let's go here as far as future me versus current me. So I'll just start. As I was thinking about the fact that sometimes current me undermines future me, I really thought of two scenarios in my life, and there's lots of them. But one is, I think when I was single, I wish that I had, Tom Bowler's going to love this, maybe made some better financial investments, maybe looked at buying a home or invested better. I think I had margin financially at that point. And
you
so
don't
I think,
have any now.
yeah, no. Well, I was like, we could have more now
Right.
if I'd invested better. So I think that's a really simple way, and I think our generosity could even be higher than it is if I'd maybe used that time when I was single to invest a little bit better financially. So that's something that I've looked back on. And then the other thing is, I didn't really take a lot of vacations. I distinctly remember, I know,
Interesting.
Monty Frazier, Skeeter, Chris Davis, Jake Wilcott, several of us, we ended up going down to Destin one summer because Monty was supposed to have his wedding on the beach, and he had some family stuff that came up, and that changed. But I really loved that time with the guys. And then I remember a trip where Chris Davis and Jason Cox and I just randomly went down to Florida, and that was so much fun. But I didn't really prioritize vacations. I didn't schedule them.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago in our marriage, I wasn't doing that, and it's because I didn't have that habit, and I had to like kind of recenter and really ask Jesus to forgive me and ask Whitney to forgive me because I wasn't thinking about vacations. I wasn't prioritizing that. And I really think a lot of that is because I had set a pattern where I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to work. And so I wish that I'd set a different pattern when I was single that would have set us up for success now. So I don't know. Those are a couple things for me. Anything for you?
Yeah. No, it's been great. I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
FYI, it is raining just a little bit now. I spoke it and it happened. But yeah, when you asked me this question, gosh, I went through a list of a lot of things, but I just feel like one of them that, looking back, I didn't leave things well. And what I mean by that is when I would transition from one place to the next, whether that be a church or maybe I did move around a lot. I changed high schools my senior year. I think that I didn't leave those things well. I think I didn't know how to say goodbye or how to transition from one place to the next, and I just left. I might have said goodbye, but I didn't keep in contact, and so I think that I don't know if there's strained relationships now because of it, but I know that I feel like that is such a distance in my past, if that makes sense. Like, when I think about it, it seems like another life, and I think it's just because I didn't transition well.
Wow.
And you really taught me how to leave something well, and that was when we left, North Cleveland Baptist, to come to, really start public church or, city church back then, but like having the conversation with Dr. J
At Jenkins. I'll never forget it. It was awesome.
Yeah, and just meeting with him and explaining why and telling people, and I don't know, I just felt like that was so good for me, to learn and see that it's okay to leave places, but how to do it well.
Yeah.
And I remember that was huge for me when I left my job before I became stay-at-home mom, was, having that conversation and then just like being up front, but being okay with the hard conversation of I'm leaving, not just leaving.
It's good.
So that's one thing. There's probably, obviously there's millions of things. So that's one that I can just distinctly think of.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I just remember, like, because we had the conversation with Dr. J, like, we were sent out from North Cleveland, and he enjoyed that process so much, and I'm like, man, like, we would have deprived North Cleveland of that privilege of being able to send us out if we hadn't had the conversation.
Yeah, so now in my brain it's like, oh, they were our sending church.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, we left really, really bad or whatever. So I just think that, like, that our relationship too with, with the church and with the people, it's good.
Yeah.
And that's what you want, so.
I love that. And so the last thing, just real quickly, is just how would future me advise current me? And something that I was thinking about, maybe just to speak kind of for where we're at in life, is I got this from Sandra Stanley in an interview that her and Andy did on parenting. Is she said, if I could go back and my kids were little, I would just get in the floor and play. And that really impacted me, and I think about that because I think there's times that I could be doing other things, or even like the dishes or something, and I know there's times the Holy Spirit's like, go play. I'm like, okay, and it's almost like I have that voice in my head from that podcast of her saying that. So I think that's like, future me would probably tell current me, like, enjoy this time, soak up these moments, like, go play and be ridiculous with my boys.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I think that's just something that really stands out to me, because it's so easy, even when we're home more in the season, to still like work on other things.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I was even just thinking while you were talking, like, just being content. I think for me, especially being a 3, is like, I want things done. I want projects done. I want, during the day I've got to accomplish this, this, and this, but it's like, just sit and enjoy the moments with our children, because I know that they're going to go by quickly. I mean, we've heard, you guys tell us that all the time. And so yeah, I think for me, it's like being content with where I'm at in life, and not keep thinking about, oh, when they're this age, you'll be doing this, or next year you'll be doing this. But it's like, hey, even in the quarantine season, be content and let God speak to us where we are. So because I think all my life I've always looked to something else in life, if that makes sense.
It does.
Once I graduate, once I get a job, once I get a house, once I have kids, it's like, just be in the moment, which is hard. It's a daily reminder, I feel like.
Yeah.
So.
I absolutely love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you, guys. We hope this has been encouraging to you. I do want to end by saying a special thanks to Mitchell Hartley for this hat from the Masters. No, I've not been there, but Mitchell gave me this hat, and Liam knows that it's from you, Mitchell.
Mitchell.
Yes, I asked him, who gave that other hat? Mitchell. So, but hey, we love you guys. Share in the comments, and we're going to keep doing this. If there's something that you would like us to talk about, an aspect of embracing the journey, share that, and know that we're all in this together, and we love you a whole lot.